A very good afternoon, everyone. I hope you and your families are safe at home. I would like to start our presentation skills workshop with a story. As and when the story unfolds, I'm sure you will be able to imagine yourself, your friend, a near one, or maybe your own sibling in the story. The story goes like this. Gogol is in his fourth standard, enjoying his summer holidays after his annual exams are over, till the day his results are announced. After he gets his report card, he sees that he has got 18th rank out of 40 students in his class. He is supposed to take the report card and go to his parents to get the signature. When he goes and shows it to his mom says, "Go and show it to your father." His father makes two comments. He says, "Gogol, you need to read and concentrate more. That's the only way to get better than what you are now." But this poor boy does not know what it means to read and concentrate. If he had known how to read effectively and how to concentrate better, then this possible situation would not arise. So, the moral of the story is that ever since childhood, most of these basic skills are never imparted to us, but always assumed. Learning is a lifelong process. In order to avoid the same fate as Gogol had in his story, Academy of Eye Care Education has promised to impart all trainees with 6 basic skills in the coming academic year. Two of the skills, learning and observation skills, has already been imparted on 15th of last month. What we are going to do today is that we are going to focus on presentation skills. What we will be left with is curiosity skills, critical thinking skills, and leadership skills, which we will take on the subsequent months. This particular journey for us of Get Going with the workshop started 1 month before. It's a great team that worked individually to put up the presentations. Enormous amount of group discussions we had thrice a week, each session lasting nearly around 2 hours. So effectively, the number of hours invested in these group discussions is more than 20 hours in planning how this meeting will take place and the content of the meeting. I'm not including the number of hours individual presenters would have put in to make these presentations. The major part of this upcoming workshop will include the 7 tools very important to make an effective presentation. And then we will have these important tools incorporated to make the head, body, and tail of the presentation. And between, we have also prepared a rubric including all the points discussed, which would help us as an objective guide to make and evaluate our future presentations. We always save the best for the last. That is how to conquer the stage fright. That's what with which we will be ending our presentation this evening. It is also heartening to understand that in this unprecedented times, while everybody worked hard to keep their morals high, two of our colleagues had been admitted as COVID suspect in hospital, then got discharged with the good news that they were negative for COVID. Despite being in the hospital, on coming back, they wasted no time and sprang back into action right away. While they could have given n number of reasons to stay back and not to join this journey, staying in the hospital, their mindset could have been shattered, but it didn't happen that way. That's the art of optimism on which the team has worked and built the content that we are extremely happy to present today. I want you all to understand that this workshop has been a very powerful, inspirational story for all of us, given the adverse situations we are in. It's a live demonstration of how every challenge contains within it the seeds of opportunity. However, this is our first online attempt on conducting a workshop, so we'll apologize in advance for any unseen glitches that comes up during the stretch of the workshop. With this, we will start with the first tool of an effective presentation, the body language. Over to you, Prabjot, for your presentation.
Hi everyone. So let's begin with the understanding of importance of body language in presentation skills. So one of the common denominators amongst the most powerful personalities across the different spheres of life, be it global leaders, be it entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, or great teachers, is their ability to effectively communicate and connect with their target audience. Now this is achieved by a perfect blend of the quality of message and an excellent use of body language as a medium of communication. So let me begin with these words by Mr. Jim Rohn, who was one of the best motivational speakers of his times. He says, effective communication is 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. And it is this 80% how you feel is what body language is all about. And this converts a normal communication into an effective communication. So body language is nothing but non-verbal communication involving body movements. Gesturing includes hand movements with facial expressions, and they can convey a lot of information without even speaking. So let me put it like this, that body language has more than 50% impact of you as a speaker on your audience. And this is not just a random figure. It has been studied and published in the works of Professor Albert Mehrabian in his 738-55 rule of personal communication. So he said that amongst the three elements of personal communication, which include spoken words, voice and tone, and body language, it is body language which comprises of 55% of the total. He also said that we deduce our feelings, attitudes, and beliefs about what someone has to say, not by the actual words spoken, but by the speaker's body language and tone of voice. Now let me give you an example here. If someone states that I really don't have a problem with you, but at the same time do not maintain enough eye contact, looks anxious, and maintains a closed body language, it is pretty obvious or natural for you to trust the non-verbal form of communication than to believe his actual words. So with this brief background, let's begin with the understanding of what are the various do's and don'ts when it comes to body language while giving a presentation. So for the purpose of better understanding, we will be discussing body language under four broad headings. First, posture, then effective use of podium, then will be gesturing, and finally, eye contact. So beginning with posture, open chest and arms with straight back not only helps you breathe better, it also helps you feel relaxed and boosts your self-confidence. It is a sign of open attitude, and this is what every audience would expect their speaker to have. An open attitude. It indicates that they are free to share their thoughts, suggestions at any point of time during the presentation. What you need to avoid is crossing arms and sitting with folded legs, hands in pocket, and a stooped posture. All this indicates a defensive attitude or a closed body language. So this should be avoided. Second is the effective use of podium. Rather, I would say that you can use your podium as a stage. And while using it as a stage, you can always have a meaningful walk while giving a presentation. But make sure you maintain your pace along with your speech delivery. Walking too fast or too long indicates nervousness and anxiety. At the same time, if you're talking too fast, it can create confusion amongst your audience. And if you're talking too slow, it can make them feel sleepy or drowsy. So now I want you to focus on the posture of the speaker and how effectively she is using the podium in this video clipping.
It's really, really great to be here. You have the power to change the world. I'm not saying that to be cliche. You really have the power to change the world. Deep inside of you, every single one of you has the most powerful device known to man, and that's an idea. So a single idea from the human mind, it can start a groundswell, it could be a flashpoint for a movement, and it can actually rewrite our future. But an idea is powerless if it stays inside of you. If you never pull that idea out for others to contend with, it will die with you. Now, maybe some of you guys have tried to convey your idea, and it wasn't adopted, it was rejected, and some other mediocre or average idea was adopted. And the only difference between those two is in the way it was communicated. Because if you communicate an idea in a way that resonates, change will happen, and you can change the world. So my family, we collect these vintage...
So I hope you noticed how effectively she used the available space on stage and how great her posture was the entire time. She matched the pace of her talk with the correct pauses wherever required. So this is what is the importance of posture and the effective use of podium. Now moving on to the third aspect, that is gesturing. Gesturing includes hand movements and facial expressions. Now in a scientific analysis on hand gestures used in TED Talks, it was found that the least popular TED Talks had an average of 272 hand gestures, whereas the most popular ones had 465. That's almost double. And what does this indicate? It definitely means that effective communicators use more hand gestures. Now, before going on to what is the right way to do it, let us first discuss what are the things which we need to avoid when it comes to gesturing. So fidgeting indicates nervousness. An expressionless face indicates a defensive attitude. So this should be avoided. Do not point directly towards your audience. It looks too aggressive. Also, standing with your hands covering your groin area doesn't look good. So just keep your hands to the side of your body. On the contrary, too much gesturing is also not a good thing to do. It can in fact create a lot of distraction. So just have a look at this video clipping and then we will discuss later.
I was the firstborn, and as far back as I can remember, I made my parents very proud and happy 99% of the time. Okay, slight exaggerations of personal achievements are allowed from time to time, don't you think? My brother was born.
So after seeing the video clip, I don't think that any one of you would disagree that the gesturing was slightly on a higher side. Then there was continuous movement of head, hands, body and waist. There was touching of face and hair. But you know what? None of this matched with whatever she said. So it was all meaningless gesturing. Then the next question that should come to you is, how do we have meaningful gestures? And the next couple of slides, let me take you through few gestures which you can use in your presentations. The first is listing. Whenever you list or count something, use a hand gesture to make the point. It does two things. It structures your message and it generates some amount of curiosity. People will want to hear what is your second, third, etc. when you count along with your hands. A fist pump is used to emphasize strength, encouragement, and intensity. Now, just like counting, whenever you have contrasting ideas, use your hands to show it. This is a this or that gesture. So this is a powerful persuasion technique whenever you're comparing two things, this or that, big or small, etc. Then you have the karate chop gesture. This should be your go-to move for your strongest point, as it says, this is how it's going to be and no other way. So that's the karate chop gesture. A finger pinch is nothing but pinch thumb and index. So whenever you agree to a comment, you can use this gesture. And the other way of using it, whenever you mean something, right? So, that's exactly what I mean. That's the time you use the finger pinch gesture. A backhand slap indicates something very important. Raised finger is usually means that, oh, I just had an idea, or probably now I understand. So that's the time you use the raised finger gesture. Air quotes denotes sarcasm, irony, or euphemisms. Then you have the steeple. So just put the tip of your fingers together and this is the steeple. If you want to look wise and powerful, use the steeple. However, it's one of the powerful moves and you should use them very, very carefully. Tapping of brain indicates, whenever you want to say, just think about it or remember this, that time you use a brain tap. Pointing hand is used for emphasis. And finally, you have the hands on heart gesture, which means I'm sincere. So whenever you say something with a lot of sincerity, it's the hands on heart gesture which you use. So having understood the right way of gesturing, let's go on to the last aspect, that is eye contact. Eye contact is very important as it engages your audience, but make sure you have shifting eye contacts. Shifting eye contacts as a beginner can be slightly tricky. So let me give you a tip here. You divide your auditorium or the class into 4 sections, and then you can keep making shifting contacts from one section to the other. So that will be like A to B to C to D and then back to A. So that's how you start making shifting eye contacts. Another way of doing it is you need to start somewhere, right? So it's always better to know a few audience than to have a room full of total strangers. So either on a routine class, you can come 30 minutes before the presentation and have a casual talk with 1 or 2 of your friends and start making your eye contacts during the presentation with them. Or during a conference, you can make some contacts a day prior, a few hours before your presentation, and then start making your eye contacts from there, and then follow the same rule of shifting eye contacts from one section to the other. Avoiding eye contact indicates nervousness and anxiety, so should be avoided. On the other hand, making repetitive eye contact with the same person can sometimes make him or her feel very uncomfortable, so this should be avoided. Now have a look on this video clipping and specially focus on the gesturing and eye contact of the speaker.
My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. They would give me an African name, Barack, or Blessed, believing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success. They imagined me going to the best schools in the land, even though they weren't rich, because in a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential. They're both passed away now. And yet I know that on this night, they look down on me with great pride. They stand here, and I stand here today, grateful for the diversity of my heritage, aware that my parents' dreams live on in my 2 precious daughters. I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
So I'm sure you noticed how effectively the speaker made eye contact not just with the camera, but also kept shifting it from one section of the audience to the other. Also, apart from the general gesturing, he used the finger pin gesture while using terms like tolerant America, generous America, which signified he really meant them. And the other one he used was the hands on heart gesture while telling his story about how he was named by his parents, which indicates sincerity. So now let's summarize. This is the slide I want you to remember. Face the audience as much as possible. Smile. Stand up straight with shoulders back straight and keep your feet shoulder width apart. Use gestures to emphasize your words. Move around the presentation space to make your speech dynamic. Take deep, relaxed breaths to help your voice project better. And finally, hold eye contacts with audience member. Take this slide as a guide with you and use it from your next presentation itself. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Today I will be discussing how to most effectively use animation as a part of your PowerPoint presentation. Over the next few slides, I will explain why we should use animation, when to use it, how, and how not to use it. Coming to the why of it. One of the most important things that animation does is that it draws attention by breaking away from the monotony. It is a great tool when you want to emphasize or highlight one particular point on your slide. When a slide contains a lot of information, be it text or a process, animation can be used to break it down and present it more systematically. This interplay between information delivered and how it is presented leads to better retention. And how exactly that happens was explained by Mayer with his cognitive theory of multimedia learning. Here he proposed that in this era of computer-based learning, there is a particular process that occurs by which data that is presented gets converted into long-term memory. So these are the steps that it included, which was selecting, organizing, and integrating. So how it works: words are what is spoken and pictures are what is seen by the audience on the screen. Words get processed by ears and pictures by eyes. But this does not happen to all the information that is being presented, and only a selected few words and images get organized and converted into the verbal and pictorial model. So this is what ultimately becomes long-term memory, and it is our goal to maximize the information reaching this stage. How do we do that? So one is by increasing the images in our presentation, because the combined effect of words with images is greater than that of only words. And this effect is further bolstered by spatial contiguity effect. That is, when words are directly placed next to their corresponding pictures. In this study, students were asked to view different processes and they were given the static and the animated version of the same process. Then they were tested immediately and 21 days later. The graph over here shows their response. So here we can see, although the initial test responses were equivocal, the long-term retention is better for the animated version. Here it is represented by the blue and the purple color for both the processes. Which is why this is one of the reasons why it is recommended that animations be used, especially when a process is being explained. So when we use animation, let us look at this. This explains how a bicycle tire pump works. When the handle is pulled up, the piston moves up, the inlet valve opens, the outlet valve closes, and air enters the cylinder. When the handle is pushed down, the piston moves down, the valve closes, the outlet valve opens, and air moves out through the hose. As you can see, there is a lot of material over here which requires significant imagination on the part of the audience to understand the process. This is another way of presenting the same information. The handles are being represented separately, then the pistons, the respective valves are opening, and air is either entering or leaving the cylinder. Here the text has been broken down into its component bits, and although this is definitely better than the previous, it still doesn't paint a very clear picture. Let us see what happens when we add an image to it. So this is a pictorial representation of the same process. While we are explaining the picture, with the help of animation, what we can do is we can add the text next to the corresponding image. So here the handle moves up, the piston moves up, the inlet valve opens, and the air, which was initially outside the cylinder, is now entering the cylinder. So by simultaneously presenting the picture and the word, this slide clearly elucidates the underlying mechanism of a tire pump. Do we stop here? No, this can be further broken down. The exact image and the text come up at the same point. But is it really required? And what are we losing out on? So if we see here the information that the composite image was giving, that the air that was outside the cylinder by moving the handle is now getting pulled in. Because the images have not been appropriately cropped, vital information which is necessary to understand the process is missing. So how much is too much? Let us see another example. This is a picture depicting the healing of the corneal epithelium. Here we can see the corneal defect, which is being covered by the surrounding cells, then by the proliferating cells, which get organized to form the new epithelium. This is a simple enough process and does not require further breakdown. Now this image also depicts the exact same process but in much greater detail. By putting up all this information in one go, you will lose the audience. Instead, by initially showing one part and explaining the different components, that is, that this is the conjunctiva, the limbus, these are the different factors involved in healing, this is the stroma, so on and so forth. When the next image is put up, the audience is already familiar with this part of the image, and now you're just adding to the pre-existing material. The same goes for the next picture, and once you complete, you have ensured that you and the listeners have stayed on the same page throughout the journey of your explanation. This is true not only for images with a lot of information, but also for text slides. This slide tells us about different generations of lubricants, and although this text can be broken up into different slides, for the purpose of comparison and completeness, it is better for it to remain on the same slide. And organize the clutter, animation can be used to present one part of the image at a time, as it is shown over here. So this explains to us when to use animation in our PowerPoints. Now let me tell you, animation can be included as a slide animation where the way one slide changes into the next is animated, and it includes several types. The other way is to animate the information on the slide per se, which determines how the data comes on and off, its order, timing, etc. Some of the common and preferred animations include the appear, the fade, the wipe, and emphasis, which can be done by either making the text bold or by changing the color. Some of the general rules are the animation has to be less than 2 seconds, and that is why the previous mentioned animation fonts are preferred. It should not be animation for the sake of animation, which is a trap that many novice PowerPoint makers fall into. It should be compatible with all platforms, and it is ideal to know the platform that will be available to you when you have to present, but that may not always be the case, and it is better to be safe. To ensure that this happens, the easiest way is to keep it simple and similar. That is, to use the same couple of basic animations throughout your presentation. Another way of ensuring compatibility is not a problem is by manipulating the text to make it look animated. So here what I have done in the next subsequent slides is that I have basically duplicated the number of the same set of slides, and I have the color of one line in each slide. So when I play it in slideshow, it will appear animated. And that I want to emphasize is, so each one of these was actually a different slide. Coming to animation for images. Ideal number of images per slide is 2. A maximum of 4 per slide is what is recommended, such that no picture is more than 25% of the total slide area. If more pictures are to be added, then it is better to use animation. Again, let us see with an example. These are the facial features of Robinson-Tybee syndrome. As previously highlighted, images are a must if we want our audience to understand and retain this information. About going about things is to put all the pictures up simultaneously. But this is distracting because there are too many, and it will become hard for them to focus on what you are trying to highlight. So let me now show you a better way. First, the beak nose. These are images of two children with beak noses, which I am highlighting with a yellow dotted line. Next, the micrognathia, which again I am outlining with a yellow line. And this is the grimacing faces of these children. So I have made each image appear when I needed and highlighted the area in that image that I wanted you to focus on. Another way of doing this is by zooming only that part of the image. So this is a picture of Acanthamoeba keratitis with radial keratinuritis seen over here. By zooming that part of the image, I am refixing your attention to my area of interest. That brings us to an end of how to animate text and images. But our discussion will be incomplete if I don't tell you the pitfalls you need to avoid. This term PowerPointlessness was given by Jamie McKenzie, where he described any fancy transitions, sound, and other effects that have no discernible purpose, use, or benefit. What he was trying to tell that animation should add to our presentation and not be the entire presentation. If the animation is distracting, the focus will shift from the content, which is the most important part. This is especially true In case of images and arrows, it is again better to avoid the flying forms of animation. Stick to the more elegant ones such as appear and fade. To conclude, I would like to summarize. The most important rule of animation is that it has to be used only when appropriate. Stick to simple modes of animation, which helps simplify and dignify your presentation. And last but not the least, follow the less is more dictum and be refrained when adding animation to your slides. Thank you for your patient listening.
Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about a pretty subtle but very important aspect of your presentation skills, and that is the tone of your voice. So for the next few minutes we're going to discuss tone and timbre, how to use your voice in a presentation. So Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher and writer, and this is one of his most famous quotes. We often refuse to accept an idea merely because the tone of voice in which it has been expressed is unsympathetic to us. This is very important because it means that despite the clarity of your argument and the weight of your words, if the audience is not receptive to the way in which you have put or expressed those words, they will reject that idea preemptively. This is a video I want to share with you. So this is actually at the time of Michelle Obama and after that Melania Trump's speeches for their husbands' respective presidential campaigns. So there's a school of thought that says that Melania has actually plagiarized all of Michelle Obama's speech. And lucky for us that she did, because here is an excellent comparison of two different types of tones using the same words.
Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values, like you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do.
My parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise.
That you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them and even if you don't agree with them.
That you treat people with respect. They thought and showed me values and morals in their daily life.
This is a glaring example that tells you that a person's tone, regardless of the words that they say, can make all the difference. In the next few slides, I'm going to give you some technical terms that will help you compare why Michelle seems to do a much more superior job here than Melania. Your voice in any presentation, in any walk of life, is composed of two components. The first is language, or the words that you use, and the second is the tone that is used to communicate those words. So language, like I said, are the words component. Now, when you're talking to a particular audience, whether it is a group of 5-year-olds or an elite audience like you would in an actual Patodia presentation, your word choice must match the target audience. In case of an audience that is highly academic, avoid informal language as far as possible and stick to academic terms because that will give you a high credibility. Audience engaging language is another tool that helps your audience understand that they also have an equal stake in the presentation or the message that you're about to convey. So to do this, there are some phrases that you can use to put across that point. Like, if I could draw your attention to, or let us look at the following example. As you may know, this tells the audience that nowhere do you think that you're superior than them or that you have something to teach them, but it's never the other way around. This way, all of you, the presenter and the response team, are all working together to make the same journey and gain the same kind of information. And that is an endearing thing for the audience to realize. Tone is the musical notes that your voice communicates separate from your words. This is all those extra qualities that make a voice sweet, that make a voice receptive, and therefore more likely to be heard than other voices. So what are the other words that we use normally for tone of voice? They are tone, inflection, intonation, accent, timbre, articulation, modulation, pronunciation, pitch, sound, all those extra X factor bits and pieces that give a voice quality. So the important point to understand here is that tone is something that defines your voice, and that's why no two voices, even if they're using the exact same words, will sound similar. So you have to be the voice. Yours has to be the voice that brings across that rich tone. So in terms of tone, we're going to discuss 4 aspects: speed, emphasis, energy, and variety. Just look at this video and we'll talk about why speed or pace of your words is so important a factor.
Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
So this happened on national television. What is the first thing you sense from this reporter? He is really nervous. But how do you know that? Number 1, he's taking deep breaths. Number 2, he's actually mushing the last part of his sentences together so that they become completely incoherent, and you know that he's not in control of the presentation. So speaking too fast gives the audience the impression that you're nervous, that you're trying to finish the PPT at whatever cost and get off the podium. It makes the presenter difficult to understand. And something else that it does is that it raises the pitch of your voice, and that is not a pleasant sound. Now compare this to the next video that I'm going to show you.
Actually, I have racked my mind and heart for what I ought to say to you today. I have asked myself what I wish I had known at my own graduation, and what important lessons I have learned in the 21 years that have expired between that day and this. I have come up with 2 answers. On this wonderful day when we are gathered together to celebrate your academic success, I have decided to talk to you about the benefits of failure. And as you stand on the threshold of what is sometimes called real life, I want to extol the crucial importance of imagination.
So J.K. Rowling is definitely not as good an orator as she is a writer. However, this video tells you that even if your words are not very flowery or not very posh, if you pace your message, if you emphasize certain important words that you want the audience to listen to, your speech, your tone takes on a whole new level. So this is why the second aspect of tone or emphasis becomes very important. Now, English is a stress-timed language. It means that the meaning of words changes based on the amount of time that you say that word for. So content words are those important specific words that you use in a presentation to actually deliver your message to the audience. Function words are words that string those content words together to make coherent sentences, like prepositions and adjectives. So using emphatic stress on the important content words of your presentation will give that message across very clearly. Energy. Now, energy is not volume. Just because you're loud doesn't make your voice attractive. In fact, it has the opposite effect. Energy is emotion. It is the vitality in your voice that changes the tone in different ways, that makes the tone attractive to the audience and helps them also have a connect with what you're saying. And the fourth aspect is variety. It's important to not be monotonous, because this way the audience is much likelier to listen to what you have to say. Let your voice reflect the experience that you want to communicate. Meaning, are you communicating failure? Is your voice becoming soft? Is it becoming sober? Is the audience able to understand that this is maybe a painful moment in the presentation? Or are you communicating a moment of triumph where finally after an arduous journey you have reached your goal? Or are you excited at a new discovery, and this excitement, it's really important that the audience also reflects it. This way your tone changes and the audience is carried into that experience with you. So match your tone to your intention, because your tone will tell the audience what they should feel. Now review again the first video I showed you, and with the technical terms I have taught you, compare the two speakers.
Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values. Like, you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do.
My parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise.
That you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them and even if you don't agree with them.
That you treat people with respect. They thought and showed me values and morals in their daily life.
Apart from Michelle's extraordinarily endearing body language, it's the pace of her words, it's the stress on her content words, it's the energy in her voice, and most importantly, it's the variety in her tone that is so glaringly absent from Melania's monotonous drone. Therefore, these small aspects lend a completely different aspect to your presentation skills, so it's important to cultivate this. Coming to a summary, remember that in your elite audience, you want to avoid formal language and you want to use audience engaging phrases. In your tone of voice, stress on the speed, give some attention to the volume, the energy and the variety so that your tone can match your intention and the audience experiences your presentation instead of just hearing it. Thank you.
Hello everyone. The ability to powerfully impact the audience is an important part of one's career and life. Humor in public speaking is an effective way to inform, persuade, connect with the audience. In the next couple of minutes, let us discuss 3 easy steps to add humor to your presentation. This was my initial reaction when my team members told me to present about humor in presentation. However, without any surprise, I got the similar kind of response from them when I presented initially. Over the time, I improved. They started enjoying my presentation. When you add humor to your presentation, your audience enjoy and it makes them glued to their chairs so that you can effectively communicate and the pass message whatever you want to communicate to them. We have 5 senses. 6th sense is sense of humor. Humor is almost synonymous with rapport. Why? When you add humor to your personal communication to a person or when you're speaking to a group of people, when you're adding humor to that, it keeps or maintains a rapport with the audience so that you can communicate easily with them and convey the message effectively to them. Mark Twain, one of the America's greatest humorists, he said, humor is mankind's greatest blessing. Let us start learning how to use this greatest blessing to make our presentations better to the best. Humor and joke both are not similar. There is a subtle difference. Humor is more at the professional level. It's more of a passive act. It's on a lighter note. The purpose of humor is not to make you laugh. The purpose is something else. Whereas coming to the joke, the purpose is to make you laugh. It's more of an active act. It's more of a stressed act. When someone is trying to add a joke or crack a joke, the main purpose is to make you laugh and they expect a reaction from you. This is exactly why you need humor in the presentation. You are not always equipped with the best sprinkler system in the world in your auditorium. But when you add humor to your presentation, that makes the audience, listeners interesting so that you can communicate the message effectively to them. The 5 biggest advantages of humor in any presentation are, it creates a bond between the listener and you. It draws the attention of the listeners. You can deliver a message for longer time. It breaks the monotony of the speaker and you are more likely to be remembered and the message is more likely to be remembered for longer time. Once you decide about adding a humor to your presentation, the next biggest question that comes to your mind is like, shall I add at the starting of the presentation or in the middle or in the ending of the presentation? Let us take this yellow line as the duration of your presentation. You can start with the presentation or in between you can add or you can end your presentation with humor. However, the advantages of humor at these positions are totally different. When you're adding humor at the starting point, it establishes the connection between you and the listener. Especially this is advantageous when you are presenting at unfamiliar environment or to unfamiliar crowd. When you're adding humor in the middle, it maintains the attention of the audience for longer time. When you're adding in the end, it helps to retain core knowledge longer. The 3 easy steps to start your presentation are: quote somebody else, tell a light-hearted story, or show a funny visual. Let us discuss each of them in detail. Quote somebody else. You can say and start your presentation by saying, Jerry Seinfeld once said, or George Burns once said. If you think your audience is not enjoying or not familiar with these speakers, you can just use a similar or easy sentences like, my father said, my mother once said, my brother used to say this always, my colleague said this, my ex-girlfriend once said this to me, and so on. The biggest advantage is like you're quoting somebody else. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work, and you can continue with your presentation normally. The second way is you can tell a light-hearted story. For example, considering this topic, how to read a 9-gauge photograph, I can tell this in 2 ways. I can tell simple and straightforward manner like, okay, let us discuss about how to read a 9-gauge photograph today. Or the second way I can use is like, I can personally reflect and tell my story about this. When I was in my first 6 months of fellowship, my mentor always made sure that I sit in first row so that I won't fall asleep once we start topic of 9-gauge photograph. The second way is little more easier and effective to communicate and pass the message to our audience. The third way is showing a funny visual. This anyone can start the presentation with, or the easiest step to follow to add humor to your presentation. You can add a picture like this, or you can add a more situation picture like this, saying that Heineken is not protective against corona since it is not using PPE and not maintaining the social distance. You can put as something like this, or you can morph a picture like this and keep your photo as well here. In this video, let us see how the speaker is trying to mock himself and make the audience laugh. Once he connects with the audience, then he continues with his story of telling what he is supposed to tell to the audience in the next couple of minutes.
Namaskar. I'm a movie star. I'm 51 years of age. And I don't use Botox as yet. And I'm clean, but I do behave like you saw, like a 21-year-old in my movies. Yeah, I do that. I sell dreams, and I peddle love to millions of people back home in India who assume that I'm the best lover in the world.
So if you see the speaker here, he initially mocked himself, drew the attention from the audience. Once they appreciated him, then he continues with the story about introducing himself, what he does, and so on. If you watch this video for few more minutes, for 5-10 minutes, for initial 3 to 4 minutes, the speaker was little nervous, but over the time, he became more comfortable. He started speaking more naturally. That's the biggest advantage of humor when you add initially at the starting of your presentation. So you can add your humor in the between as well. For example, if this is the content of my presentation, if I want to tell how to read a 9-gauge photograph from this slide, I can tell in 2 ways. In simple form, like let us start learning this 9-gauge photograph from reading from the primary gaze, then in the right gaze, then in the left, then in the up, right up, left up, then in the down, right down, and left down. This is the one way and easiest and simple way. The second way is like you can tell. Reading a 9-gauge photograph was always a nightmare for me. And my mentor once said that easiest way is to start reading from the primary gaze, then in the right, then in the left, then go to the up gaze, then complete the right up, right up and left up, then go to the down gaze, then to the right down and the left down. Then I followed this. In spite of following this, I missed a small deviation in this patient, which I gradually picked up over the time. The second way is definitely more effective than the first way, which drew the attention of the audience when you're presenting to a larger audience. So in this video, let us see how the speaker is trying to draw the audience attention in the middle of his presentation. Then once they appreciate his sense of humor, then he continues what he's supposed to do.
We have half the Indian population pretty much under 25. We are an amazingly young country. In fact, if you just take the age group from 10 to 19, there are 226 million Indians. poised, in other words, to enter higher education, going through school and ready for higher education. Now, this is amazing because it's happening at a time when the rest of the world is aging, right? If you look at the average age in India today, it's 28. Of course, don't ask about the gap, since we heard about gaps between the average age of the Indian person and of the Indian cabinet. I think we hold the world record for that. But that's another matter. That's another TED talk, right? But
so in this, the speaker effectively and interestingly drew the comparison between the average Indian age and average Indian politician age, intentionally to draw the attention of the audience. Then once they clap for that, then he continues with his speech, and he started continuing with the passing of message through these speeches. To end any presentation, sometimes it ends with call for action, saying that let us complete this in next couple of months or weeks. Sometimes it ends with a story with moral, or most of our subspecialty presentations or 40-day presentations, it ends with summary. Any of this, if you add humor in the end, it's gonna give a memorable ending. So the easy tips, what I would like to tell you are, do what naturally comes to you, be more authentic, and keep it on lighter note. Avoid sarcasm on audience or overdoing humor. To conclude, the 3 easy steps to start are: can quote somebody else or funny anecdotes, tell a personal story, show a funny picture or visual, and do what naturally comes to you. Do more authentic and be more authentic. Keep it light and avoid sarcasm, as I said, on audience or overdoing it. Let's start making our presentations more humorous from now. These are my references. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on psychology of attention and retention. Today, I will take you deep into the science behind these 2 topics. For our simplicity, we will take these 2 problems one after the other. So speaking about attention, John Medina, the author of bestseller Brain Rules, said that if keeping someone's attention in a lecture was a business, it would have an 80% failure rate. And I completely agree with him. Simple truth is that all of us crave for attention as humans. You wouldn't believe how many times I have thrown a temper tantrum to get my parents' attention as a kid, or the number of times I did something foolish to get attention of my beloved crush. So it's obvious, while on a public platform, I would want all eyes on me. But unfortunately, due to social constraints, I just can't throw another temper tantrum here. So let us try and understand the actual science behind attention before trying to capture it. According to a study by Times Group, attention span of a human is just 8 seconds, which is lesser than that of even a goldfish. But just like all things that go viral on internet aren't necessarily true, this study was also flawed and had poor scientific basis. There are multiple other studies which have been propagated since the 1970s saying that we can maintain meaningful attention for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. As this graph shows, that our mind wanders with time in a lecture, and the memory of the lecture material is also thought to decline in the latter half of the lecture. However, multiple other studies have given conflicting results, and 2 recent reviews actually debunked the theory of 10-minute attention span, with most previous studies having varied results, poor methodologies, and significant differences in ways of measuring attention. We all remember that how during our exams we sat for hours together, keeping ourselves focused and having high productivity even with long periods of study. Just imagine if your attention span was 10 minutes or worse, only 8 seconds, every exam would have caused a panic attack. So, what drives our attention to last longer? While there are many factors, 2 of these are most important. First, it's the effort, and second is the arousal. Our brain has the capacity to increase its performance depending on the difficulty of the task. So we work at low capacity for simple tasks while we become more and more focused and put in more effort as the task becomes tougher to a certain extent. I know I had to be much more focused when I was studying maths, a subject that still gives me nightmares, as compared to the minimal effort I needed to understand biology. Unknowingly, my brain adjusted to both in terms of my effort. Another interesting concept was given by Yerkes and Dodson, who showed that we need to maintain appropriate level of arousal to maintain a high performance level. Arousal simply means being physiologically alert, motivated, and attentive. Now, for a task that's routine or easy, we need high level of arousal to maintain high level of performance. But much lower arousal is needed for a difficult task because our brain automatically becomes more focused. So in the original experiment conducted by Yerkes and Dodson, when mice were made to reach cheese through a maze, intermittent small electric shocks kept their arousal appropriately high, and being focused, they reached the target faster. But when high energy electric shocks were given to them, their performance dropped significantly and they became confused. So finding the right amount of arousal during your presentations is important. In other words, you should simplify a complicated concept for your audience, and you should try to turn a concept which is too simple into something very interesting to have appropriate levels of arousal. So what can you do to maintain attention? You need to do something emotionally relevant every few minutes to maintain a grip on your audience. Tell a story or intersperse your presentation with questions for the audience. Ask your audience to do a relevant task during the presentation, or use a relevant video which is appropriately placed in your presentation. The more you involve the audience, the more attentive they will be. And if nothing works, maybe a little electric shock hidden in the chairs to wake them up wouldn't be so bad, would it? So, before we move on to understanding the science of retention, let us review what we learned about attention. We need to keep the arousal of the audience at an appropriate level depending on the complexity of the topic. Attention lasts for only 10 minutes is a myth that needs to be debunked. So to maintain the audience's attention during a presentation, right balance of complexity and interest is needed at different times. Always remember that simplify a concept that is too complicated and present a basic concept in an interesting way. And lastly, doing something emotionally relevant every few minutes would involve your audience and prevent them from snoozing. And if nothing else, you can always throw a temper tantrum on stage. Now, after learning about attention, let's bring our focus to the second concept about psychology of retention. Just for a moment, try and go back to the last time you attended an amazing live lecture in the last 3 months. Are you there yet? Now, I'm sure you remember who gave that presentation. But if I ask you, do you remember any significant content from that talk? I'm sure most of you, if not all, would not be able to recall even 10% of the actual content of that amazing lecture that you heard. But why is that? Don't you find it odd? Psychology of retention and how it works has also been extensively studied with varying methodologies and results. But to reach a crux or to simplify this complex issue, let me bring you to the learning pyramid. Now you see in the learning pyramid, the apex of the pyramid has passive formats of learning with poor retention using these methods. While as we go down, and with significant increase in active involvement of the audience or participants, there is marked improvement in the retention ability. So what is the mistake that we make routinely? Number one, we give too much information without enough time to connect its dots. Secondly, unless the facts or information that we are providing has a deeper meaning that's understood by our audience, it will not be retained. And thirdly, we often forget that an emotional connect will always enhance the learning experience of our audience. And why do I say all this? Because our brain is wired to notice patterns that have a common theme. So, we need to structure our presentations around a key central idea supported by a web of details around it. Now, if I ask you to try and remember these random letters that have been displayed in front of you, you will find it very hard to do so. But if I showed you the same letters have a pattern to them, it makes it very easy for you to remember this information as a pattern of different abbreviations like IRS, IBM, KGB, etc. This is how complex information becomes easier for our brain to understand if we recognize the patterns. To further know how our memory works, let us understand two other concepts. Firstly, the widely accepted Atkinson and Shiffrin model tells us that most of the day-to-day information is stored as short-term or sensory memory, which is soon forgotten in a very short period of time. But if this short-term memory is reinforced by repeated rehearsal or repetition before its decay, then it is converted to our infinite long-term memory. In short, if you as an audience come prepared for a lecture, get involved actively during the lecture, and reinforce the learnings of the lecture soon after it, only then you will retain all that information. The second concept is that of deep learning. So our brain processes the information either superficially or in a deeper manner. While when the input is just visual or auditory, without understanding the underlying meaning behind it, then recall of that information will always be poor. In other words, when you present to an audience, images and verbalized information alone is ineffective. You need to aim at making the audience understand the underlying concept with deeper clarity to what it means. So, in the movie Inception, which is one of my favorite movies, Cobb or Leonardo DiCaprio wants Fisher to split his father's company. And to do that, he incepts the idea in the third level of dreaming, that is deep inside the brain, simplifying it to his father saying to Fisher, "Son, I want you to be your own man." This simple idea, implanted deep in Fisher's brain, erupts in his mind, making him split his father's company. So, by your presentation, you should implant a simple idea deep enough in your audience's brain, and you will see the remarkable results later. So if we again review how psychology of retention works, I think it is time for us to take revolutionary steps within our organization from the apex of this pyramid towards the base by engaging in newer formats of learning powered with energetic discussions and active participation of our audience. Remember that deep learning is always retained better, and to achieve that, more than delivering information, you should give an understanding of the underlying concept to your audience. Lastly, just like the solar system where all planets revolve around the sun, your presentation should have one key central idea acting like the sun with all the other details revolving around it. You should try not to get lost in the vast empty space all around. Before I end, I will leave you with this final thought, that your presentation should not aim to merely pass on information, but it should aim to inspire your audience. Thank you.
Hi all. The topic for today's presentation is font and background in PowerPoint presentation. Don't get deserted by these words. I will make you familiar by sharing an incident which happened recently in one of my conferences. Dr. X, a famous clinician, came to the conference and was about to share his experiences to the medical team. All of us are eagerly awaiting. He started the presentation. He felt excited to share his great work with us, but our thoughts were different. He finished the presentation and asked, "How was the presentation?" This was the answer given by us. The font type and size was not readable. White background is blinding. We should understand that a good font and background will probably go unnoticed in amazing presentations, whereas a bad choice of font and background, however, is a capital sin in presentation designs for which there will be no hiding place. It was found that 32% of lecturers at the conferences received at least one negative comment about the inferior quality of their word slides in PowerPoint presentations. How to avoid this? How to acquire visual literacy? Full mastery of these techniques involve long apprentice, which is difficult in this scenario. In this limited space, I will brief you the basic key principles of relevant visual design to make decent PowerPoint presentation. Good visual design aims to ease the communication, facilitates an enjoyable flow of information from the presenter to viewer to enhance the legibility and accessibility of the content of the presentation. To make it feasible, font and background are subdivided under these subheadings: font into type and size, background into template, color, image, graph. What should be the font type and size in a PowerPoint presentation? To start, there are lots of choices for the font types. The two most important categories you need to understand is serif font, sans serif font. The main difference between these two, as you see in serif fonts, they have extra stroke on the end of letters, whereas sans serif font types are simple and clean with sharp borders. The best example is traditional Snellen's charts, which were replaced by ETDRS charts. That's why on computer screens, sans serif fonts are preferred as they are more geometric and easier to see on screens, whether in small or big halls. It has been suggested to avoid different font types in PowerPoint presentation. What is the best font size? Remember, your slide should be visible even at the back of the room. Font size is measured in points. These are the standard font sizes recommended for maximum legible viewing distance. Use large font for the title ranging from 36 to 40 points and use no font size smaller than 24 points for the content. These are the do's and don'ts for the font. Select readable font and standardize throughout. Avoid all capital letters, which makes the text hard to read and denies their use for emphasis. Avoid different styles and italics, which distracts the audience and makes difficult to read quickly. Rule of 6. It can be used to determine appropriate amount of text for a slide, which refers to 6 lines per slide and 6 words per line. Here the purpose of text is not to provide something for the presenter to read, but rather to emphasize a point that the presenter can expand on. This technique allows the presenter to be in control of audience. It is effective to use one idea or one concept per slide or blank slide technique. Here, place the title on the slide and leave the text of body blank. This technique clears the screen and allows the audience to concentrate solely on the speaker. Avoid long sentences and limit punctuation marks. Some presenters lump too much data on a slide, fearing that they might leave something out or that the audience won't get it, resulting in retroactive inhibition. It is a tendency of the students to remember less when told more. Coming to the second part, background. Same thing holds for the background. It should not compromise the readability of the audience. Use same background on each slide. Choose an appealing, consistent template that is not too eye-catching, as you don't want the background to detract from your message. Do not use multiple backgrounds in your presentation. Changing the style is distracting. Clashing colors provide readability. These are the contrasting or complementary colors which were found to give best readability. Always avoid these combinations: dark yellow on green, purple on blue, orange on green, green on blue, red on green. Especially the red and green ones, which can be difficult to see for those who are colorblind. Dark slides with light color text works best. Avoid white backgrounds, which can be blinding in a dark room. Image versus text. According to many statistics, a significant percentage of population are visual learners. When you pair the text with an exciting image, a viewer's eye flows to the content. The accepted ratio for image to text is 80:20. Avoid these ratios as this is less attentive. If length and breadth of the image is not proportionate, don't just pull one side of the image, which results in disproportionate image. Try to enlarge the image diagonally and try to fit it to the slide. If image blurs with enlargement or not expandable, just keep the image size as such and hide the background. Sometimes, if the image is complex to place the text, blur the background part of image and place the text over it as shown here. Last but not the least, use simple and detailed graphs. It is difficult for the audience to absorb lots of data in tables where graphs are simple to show the trends. Slides with graphs should not be too complex. Our idea is to try to reduce the time and effort for the audience to find and understand the slide. I'm not going to tell you which chart to select, but focusing on how to and how not to display the chart in the coming few slides. Maintain uniform chart style. Use full axis and don't cut in between. Don't overload the unimportant data using more than 6 colors or too many animations. Use color with high contrast and try to highlight the data. These are the 10 tips I am asking you not to add but to remove to improve your graphs. I will show this by giving an example. This is the graph for calories per 100 grams for different foods. Now I am going to remove those 10 tips. First, I am removing the background. This is the graph after removal of the background. Now I am removing the tables, labels, borders, reducing the colors. Now removing the special effects, bold letters, lightening the labels, lightening the lines, or even I can remove the lines, and finally directly labeling. Believe less is more effective, attractive, and impactful. This is the graph before removing those 10 tips and after removal. To summarize, select readable font, follow rule of 6, use standardized backgrounds and clashing colors, use appropriate image text ratio, use simple and detailed graphs. Do not use the media to hide you. The audience came to see you. The media should enhance the presentation, not be the presentation. Thank you. For any queries, please mail me.